We would like to thank Rixons for sponsoring this video and providing guidance and help to help us install the system as first-time builders.
Hi everyone, this is Michelle and Will, and today we're bringing you the installation of the Rixons MCS One heating system for our van. This is an all-in-one heating system that provides us with hot air, hot domestic water, as well as radiant heating for our heated floor, which we've also purchased from Rixons. Okay. So we're going with this approach as opposed to the traditional furnace heating because the radiant heat that this system will provide us with won't dry out the air as much, which we prefer, as well as providing us with even heating across the entirety of the van, so we don't have the front being hotter than the back of the van. Rixons was very supportive in walking us through how the system works and what parts we would need to install. They were readily available to answer our questions as well as help us understand what parts we would need to install for our configuration. For us, we went with the additional engine heat kit as well as the floor heat kit. The engine heat kit allows us to use the van's engine waste heat to provide heat to the rest of our system, so we are not letting that go to waste. And the floor heat kit just allows us to connect our radiant floor heating to this box, so it's an all-in-one solution for us. So first we're going to be installing the furnace on the underside of the van. So we're going to be putting our MCS One in the rear passenger side of our van, which means this will be mounted on the underside of the van right over here, which I'll show in a minute. But this is the S-Bar diesel heater, which we purchased through Rixons. Right here we have the intake and outtake for the coolant loop, which will run from the furnace into the MCS One and back. On the other side here we have the connection for the fuel, which will be connected to our diesel fuel tank on the underside of the van as well. You have a spot for exhaust and then the electrical connections as well. So the furnace comes with mounting hardware included. It won't be assembled when you first get it, but I've already assembled it so that we can do a test fit. You just screw it in one spot on the furnace with a self-threading screw, and that can go on either side of the furnace here, depending on the orientation that you're going to put your furnace. So one important thing to note is you do want to mount this furnace in this orientation with the this plastic cover with the intake and outtake on the lower part of the furnace. And this can really be mounted in this orientation or flipped this way, and maybe it'll have your mounting bracket on the other side. But, just important to note that this is the orientation you want it in. Okay, so the first thing I'm doing here is just test fitting the furnace with the bracket on. I just put it up where I want to mount it and then draw out some circles with a pencil. So to mount the bracket here, I drill out these holes and then I put riv nuts inside them, and after drilling out each of the holes to the size of my riv nut, which I think was like an M5, I just use a deburring tool around the edges to make sure it's smooth, and then I put a bit of primer on so that we don't get any rust, and then followed by using a riv nut tool to get those riv nuts in, and then we can screw in the bracket. After the bracket's in, we just put in the furnace on the bracket and then screw it in with that one screw I showed earlier, and there's the furnace mounted. So the next thing that I do is make the holes where the heater hose is going to go in and out between the furnace and the MCS One. So I just go in with a pilot hole first, and then I use a hole saw to make a hole about the size of the heater hose. So I think here I use about a 1-inch hole saw. Ooh. Okay, next is the exhaust for the furnace. So here I just have to mount the muffler. It's pretty lightweight, so I just use these brackets that were included in the kit that I got. And some self-tapping screws, and they hold up the exhaust pretty well. Rixson sends a pretty decent sized exhaust tube, so I just cut it down to the size that I need to go between the furnace and the muffler, and then once again from the muffler just down towards the floor underneath the fan. I also make sure to put a clamp on each connection point of the exhaust tube and tighten it with a socket wrench. Okay, so the next thing that I'm doing here is mounting a plate exchanger. This comes with the engine heat kit, and it is what will be used to transfer heat between the engine coolant and our coolant running through the MCS One system. I mount the plate exchanger in the same way I did with the furnace, where I trace out the holes and then drill out the holes in the van wall, add some riv nuts, and then screw in the plate exchanger bracket along with the plate exchanger. Next, I decided to start routing the heater hose. First, it's going to go through the floor of the van. One end will go into the furnace, and the other end will be routed all the way up to the plate exchanger. Here I'm using an angle connector to make sure the hose is not being kinked in some tight places that I'm routing it. So I've got the two coolant lines routed into the van. This is coming out from the MCS One to the plate exchanger. Meanwhile, this from the furnace is coming out from the furnace into the MCS One, so this is the one that will have the hot coolant that will heat up our van. So here's my plate exchanger now. This is the coolant line that will be coming out from the MCS One, and then into the plate exchanger. It'll come out this side, heat it up, back over to the furnace. This is coming out from the plate exchanger, and will go all the way to the engine. So I've zip tied all of the line to the frame of the van so it's not moving too much, but yeah, this just goes in and then up to the bay of the engine. This is the pump that will pump the coolant in the loop when the van is off, so it's powered through the MCS One, so I've routed that line all the way back to where the furnace meets with the van floor. So this is my Sprinter engine bay. Here is the hose from the plate exchanger, which I've routed up here. I'm planning to make the cut here, right next to the firewall. So this, which is coming from the plate exchanger, will go into this side, and meanwhile from the firewall we'll have another hose that comes back down and into the plate exchanger. Okay, so I have the hoses for the engine loop ready to go. All that's left to do is to either make a splice in the hose right over here and connect them in, or I might see if I can just get this clip off and then just connect the existing hose coming out of the firewall to this, which will go into the pump, and then connect this into the metal tube on the other side. So I decided to just remove the clamp and take off the hose coming out of the firewall. I just made sure to use a bucket for the little bit of coolant that was still in the lines and not to make a mess. Okay, so we've made our connections, made sure the clamps are on, everything's all good. Now time to test and check if there's any leaks. I'm gonna turn on the engine. So at first I didn't observe any leaks in this loop. However, once the coolant really got hot, there were some minor leaks coming out of the plate exchanger, and it turned out that I had to put some pipe tape on those brass fittings and then also just tighten them a little bit better. Once I did that, I had no more leaks to worry about. Next, I mounted the fuel pump right near the fuel tank at the 15 degrees orientation it needed to be in. I just found a nice place to screw in a self-tapping screw, and I had to use an angle driver for this, but it worked out pretty well. This is the wire harness for our furnace. This cable right here is the power for our fuel pump. It's too short though, because we have to route it all the way to the fuel tank, which is halfway past the VIN. So what I've done is I've cut the wire and added these heat shrink tubes. I'm now going to add some 16 gauge wire, heat shrink that, and then connect it onto the other side of my heat pump wire. So here I'm showing how we routed the hose and the wiring across the bottom of our van. In this clip I show some zip ties which we used. We later got some advice from Rixon's that it's best not to use zip ties here. So we went back and put some clamps on these looms and various hoses, which I'll be sure to add pictures of at the end of this video. So here I'm just adding the heat shrink tubes to the other side of the 16 gauge wire, which I routed across the van, and then I connect the power connector to the fuel pump. Next, I'm connecting the fuel line, which is coming from the furnace, into the fuel pump. The top side of the fuel pump is where it comes out, and then to the furnace, and then the bottom side is what will go into the auxiliary line of my fuel tank. So I've made a little wood platform for the MCS One box to sit on so the air vents are higher, but right here I'm showing the two connections where the heater hose is going to come in and out of the MCS One. So from that expansion tank in the top there, it's going to come down and into the plate exchanger down below, and then from the plate exchanger into the furnace, and then back up here. This overflow tube I'm going to route in through another hole I'm going to make into the van floor. Okay, now both sides of the heater hose have been connected into the MCS One. Here's another angle from the inside where that brass is where the connection was made. Next I'm going to do the electrical connections for the box. Pull this off to connect our 4-pin and our 3-pin air temperature sensor, and they're just gonna go kind of back there. Yeah, just that box right there. So as you can try to see here, there are the two connectors, the 3-pin on the left there and the 4-pin on the right. Now time to put this bad boy back into place. Just now, this is the furnace power, which I've routed to do the little hole there, and then I'm just gonna connect it to these snap connectors here. Brown wire is connected to our negative black, and red wire to our red wire here. All right. Okay, we are all connected for the furnace power. Now all that's left is the control board wires. There's going to be one for the touchscreen panel and then one for the preheat pump. Okay, so now I got my 16 gauge wires in. This one is for the touchscreen control panel, and then this is for the preheat pump down below. Okay, now on this control board, our touchscreen control will connect to 1 for the positive, and then either down here it will be E, F, or K. I'm going to connect it to K just because it's closest to 1 there. And then for the preheat pump, it will connect to 5, and then down to L for the ground or negative. Okay, here we go. So touchscreen positive connected to 1, and the ground is connected to K over here, and then the preheat pump positive connected to 5 over here, and then connected to the negative or ground L. So now we're good. Gonna close this thing up. Okay, so I hooked up, there's a pipe that's labeled in, and then there's another one that is out. It's actually just a white PEX A tube, but these are PEX B tubes. So I decided to just take out this PEX A and connect another PEX B on the inside here. See if you can see barely there. There's a red tube going in, just so I don't need an adapter to connect the PEX A to PEX B, and instead I just have these angle brackets that are going into my heated floor. So for filling the coolant, it's going to be right on the top here. Just take off the valve and then fill it with, I just grabbed Dex Cool antifreezing coolant, and yeah, it's a 50-50 pre-diluted, so that is the recommendation, as can be seen on the tag there. So yeah, it says to fill it up almost full, so I'm just gonna do that now. Okay, so I've powered up my MCS One box, and here's the touch screen just booting up now. Yeah, let's see what happens. All right, it's booted up, giving us the air temperature at 50 degrees. Everything is off right now. Let's see about doing a purge first, as mentioned in the directions, using the prime function, and then observing the fuel coming out. Excellent. Okay, so on the control panel here, I just have everything set to off. I'm going to do some basic testing, starting with the furnace. So I have fan speed off here. I'm just going to turn off the furnace. Right now my outside temp's 55. I'm going to set it to 60. And then once I confirm the furnace is working fine, I'll try the floor heat. There we go. So you turn it on. And here, the fluid moving in the tank, and then here's our fluid temp. So we're gonna wait for that to reach temp. Okay, feel the coolant temp is hot, and now I've turned on the floor heating as well. And I have seen that we have these pipes are warm. I think I might need more coolant added, but yeah, we have warm coolant in here. And our pipes back here, also warm. So these are all the major components that we installed for this heating system. Our van is still a work in progress, so we're going to be cleaning up and making some more tweaks as we go. We already started adding some clamps for our hoses instead of those zip ties. But for the most part, this is our entire heating system. Okay, so that was our installation of the Rixon's MCS One heating system. I want to take a second to thank Rixon's one more time for all of their support throughout this process. We're so excited to use this amazing heating system on our journeys to come. If you'd like to follow what we're doing, please stay tuned to the channel and we'll be sharing our adventures soon. Thanks. Bye.